Interim fantasy drafts. Here's a few quarterbacks I would avoid drafting this season. The first guy, Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys. So Dak Prescott last season wasn't a great year at all for him. I believe 15 interceptions, 2860 yards passing, 23 touchdowns, 182 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. And remember, Dak Prescott, he missed 4 or 5 games last season with the hand injury. So right now, a lot of interceptions last season. I know the Cowboys upgraded a little bit. Obviously, getting Deuce Vaughn, who could catch the ball out of the backfield in the NFL draft, and adding a wide receiver like Brandon Cooks that could stretch the field and has had many 1,000-yard seasons in his NFL career. But the accuracy hasn't been there for Dak Prescott the last couple years. The bad decision-making's been there for him leading into interceptions. And last year, a lot of ball games where he was underwhelming in fantasy football when he returned, where he had a lot of games under, like I mentioned, 20 or less fantasy points, which obviously isn't going to cut it. Most drafts, he's going 7th or 8th round, where I think's a little high here right now for Dak Prescott. And this Cowboy team, offensively on paper, they look good. But last season, a lot of ball games, they won with Cooper Rush early in the season with a decent running game and relying on the defense. So Dak Prescott, we know he's got, obviously, good weapons around him over there with CeeDee Lamb, had a great year last year. You also got Brandon Cooks, like I mentioned. Michael Gallup now is the number 3 receiver. Tony Pollard out of the backfield can make things happen catching the ball. And now Jake Ferguson stepping in as the number 1 tight end with Dalton Schultz going away to the Texans. But I still believe Dak Prescott, even with all these weapons, he's not going to be consistent for fantasy football, especially where his ADP is going. And I'd rather have other quarterbacks down there like a Deshaun Watson. I'd rather have than a Dak Prescott, a Daniel Jones because of his rushing ability, obviously a Justin Fields, a Herbert, and a Lawrence. So right now, I would try to avoid Dak Prescott if I could get one of those other quarterbacks, even a Tua as well, that I mentioned. The next quarterback's Matthew Stafford of the Los Angeles Rams. So Matthew Stafford, we know he's a gunslinger, but we also know he's had a lot of injuries throughout his career. Last season, he missed tons of time, only playing pretty much half a year. 1,087 pass yards, 10 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and a rushing touchdown last season. So Matthew Stafford hopefully comes back 100% healthy this season. After last year, it was just a bad season for him with the injuries, especially the elbow. And the elbow, if it can never get right, especially in your throwing arm, that always could be a problem. You know, this Ram team, they still have a potent offense. Cam Akers in the backfield, Cooper Kupp, Von Jefferson I like a lot as a deep threat. So maybe Stafford could turn things around. And yes, his ADP isn't all that bad right now. He's going in the later rounds, in the latter part of your draft. But if you're going into the season with Matthew Stafford, even in the 2-quarterback league, as one of your starters, he's not really a quarterback I would be enthused to have on my roster with his injury concerns, with him up there in age, and even with Cooper Kupp right now dealing with a little bit of a hamstring injury, even though I think he'll be fine going into the regular season here. Just Matthew Stafford with all those factors, and last season, even before he got hurt totally, he wasn't getting much done, like I said, his Stafford, with the 10 touchdowns and the 8 interceptions. I always knew Matthew Stafford was amongst the league leaders each season in throwing interceptions. The next quarterback's Russell Wilson of the Denver Broncos. So Russell Wilson, I know with Sean Payton, he definitely could turn things around after last season. It was a total train wreck in his first year with the Broncos. And Nathaniel Hackett is the head coach, and he does have decent weapons. Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Greg Dulcich, and in the backfield, Samaje Perine and Javonte Williams, if he's going to be healthy entering the season. But right now, you just can't trust Russell Wilson, in my opinion, after the season last year. Like, I had high hopes last season for him being a nice quarterback for fantasy owners, but that totally didn't happen. And he finished the year with 3,524 pass yards, 16 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 277 rush yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns. And Wilson, he only missed 2 ball games as well last season. So maybe with Sean Payton, he could turn things around. But after the year we saw from him last season, he couldn't make a lot of the deep throws. A lot of bad decisions with Wilson, which obviously was uncharacteristic of Wilson as well. But right now, I just don't want to deal with him once again this season. After last year, I did draft him in a couple leagues, and he was very underwhelming. And by week 3 or 4, you had to pull him out of your starting lineup. So right now, Wilson could bounce back, but I just want to avoid him. And there's so many quarterbacks this season, like I mentioned early in the video, that I'd rather have than the Dak Prescott, and obviously over a Russell Wilson as well. The next quarterback's Geno Smith of the Seattle Seahawks. So don't get me wrong, Geno Smith last season, it was a great year for him, but I don't know if he could do it once again now I know he got his money finally after years on the bench and being obviously considered a bust if the New York Jets took him early in the draft many seasons ago. So Smith last season, great stats, no doubt about it. 4,200, 82 pass yards, 30 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Showed some running ability as well, obviously. 366 rush yards and a touchdown. And he definitely has good weapons over there. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, the rookie Smith they drafted at wide receiver as well. Kenneth Walker in the backfield. Noah Fant at tight end. So he's got the weapons over there in Seattle. But I think teams this year, they're going to be more prepared for Geno Smith. And also his ADP, I don't like him in the 8th and 9th round, where he's been going most parts here is Geno Smith. Guys like a Watson and Aaron Rodgers, even a Jordan Love maybe this season, I might consider taking over at Geno Smith. I feel like last season was a little bit of a fluky type of year. And there were a lot of ball games as well where Seattle was trailing and he had no choice. But obviously to drop back and throw the football 45, 50 times. So I don't know if we're going to get that a lot out of Geno Smith this season. Offense has changed up a little bit as well over there with the offensive coordinator and stuff. And right now, as a backup quarterback or even a second quarterback, possibly in a 2-quarterback league, I'm fine with Smith in that aspect. But going into the season with him as a starter on your roster in a 12 or even a 14-team league, I don't really trust him in the 5th and final quarterback. I would avoid this season in your fantasy draft is Derek Carr of the New Orleans Saints. So last season, everything was in place for Derek Carr to have a big year over there in Las Vegas with Davante Adams, Hunter Renfrow, Josh Jacobs, who was a monster on the ground, possibly the best back arguably in the league last year. And it just didn't pan out to be anything here for Derek Carr. 3,522 pass yards, 24 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, and 102 rush yards. So the interceptions were up for Derek Carr. Now he goes to New Orleans. Yes, he did sign a massive contract. And they got some intriguing options on that offense, obviously, over there in New Orleans. You got Chris Olave, who had a great rookie season. You got Michael Thomas, but I can't trust him as well. You don't know what you're going to get from Michael Thomas at this point, and people just keep giving him chances in fantasy football. But if you want to avoid one player, and that will come up in later videos, Michael Thomas is definitely one of them because he's a walking injury at this point, and he's a guy that got his money. But anyway, Alvin Kamara now suspended 3 games. We know he's a good asset out of the backfield, catching the football. I know Jamal Williams is there, solid signing in the offseason, but I just don't see it coming all together here with Derek Carr, especially last season where they had a killer team over there on offense was that Raider team. Waller and Davante Adams and Renfrow alone should have generated a lot of yards and big plays for the Raider team in Carr stats, but it didn't happen. And right now in New Orleans, I don't think it's going to happen great as well. I think a similar season we could see from Carr to last year's stats. So that's a few quarterbacks I look to avoid on draft day here, entering the 2023 season.